Yes, yes. I awareness, is more of us being self-realized more. But it's amazing, Lukey, because, we're, all of us as human beings, we're really instinctively social. When people are ending up in the same room together, their hearts start to beat together, and even people breathe together. These things show that humans are instinctively social, and our ethne, which is the extended family around, and the society in the way that we have functioned, our brain never really had to remember pleasantry much at all. So, the brain in a social dynamic is sort of more set up just to have a bit more Teflon for what mostly is felt, which is happiness. But that in a situation which would be a social paradigm, there might be sometime. There may be another, a paradigm. Let's see. The paradigm really of Velcroing. Right now, I think where we are in our program, we could just simply say that there's a force inside which Velcros negative, all right? And that is really, really something which is a hardwiredness, and try as hard as you can to get rid of that. You're not going to. You seriously have got a hardwiredness for negativity, and it's like 5 times more than what is pleasantry. And now, that all would work really good in a situation where society really is for you, and everything is really eye-aware. But we're living in a world where everything on the outside is really, really messed up quite a bit, and so that relies upon you being able to have your own inner calm, and but that eye awareness, you've got to really do more than just sort of do nothing. You have to really be fully accelerated of your feeling of love. And to do it. And it's an outward live meditation, all right? And that's Velcroing what's positive versus, Velcroing negative. It's Velcroing the positive and Tefloning the negative. But if our listeners and people viewing the show, we can get some visual pictures up of the brain, the septal region of the brain, and where that is, and the amygdala. And the septal region of the brain and the amygdala is firing. The septal region of the brain is firing as you're feeling pleasure, and it neurologically inhibits the amygdala. The amygdala and tegmentum is involved in aversion and inhibition and dissociation. And I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of people really are dissociated fully. They're not really aware of their surrounds at all. They've got a lot of stuff going on inside and seeing. But we're supposed to be in a world where ethne really is caring and knowledgeably knowing you, You're not supposed to be in a world where people are servicing you and they don't have any knowledge, but that's what's going on, all right? So that's all. And so you take personal responsibility for being aware of this. That's all right? But you've got to take personal responsibility because negativity can have been trumping positive. And it's really easy to acquire feelings of learned helplessness where these benzodiazepine, receptors that we have kind of had molecules being made because people can have not necessarily been in their ordinary original self, which is pleasantry and which is playfulness. and our playfulness is our original condition. When somebody's not in their playful self, it's like, that's not original, People could be just dissociated, they can be so internal dialogue, not noticing things on the outside at all, and just running over people, basically, and just life is like that, clearly. Bad carries more weight than good, and 5 positive is necessary often to clear away what one negative it is. I'm talking really because I'm really caring very much that people can be responsible where they are, and you can know, that if you participate in protected disclosure and conduct, you're taking responsibility for being aware that you've done this like I am. And there's people can not necessarily do the right thing, and you don't want to be a martyr, but you also just don't want to be a pushover. You want to do what you can to be able to get things done, but be swum, not have to do all the swimming and everything. You have to unlearn negative experience, you see, but an unlearned negative experience exists and is still sort of indelible in the brain, and that's the reason why Bambi doesn't forget where the tiger is, because, it's something that you have a memory of. Negative experiences are equivalent to being pessimistic and overreactive, and they go negative. One goes negative on themselves, and that's all a triggeredness that can have been. Are you still there, mate? Hello?
Dr. Jubb, hey,
yeah.
I put myself on mute. I got some kind of ghetto-rigged studio. We are broadcasting live on Jubb.tv. With
sound okay, mate?
Sound is great.
Is our sound good? Sorry. Does our sound good?
Yep.
Okay, so, all right. But, eye awareness really is to do what a person can to be able to avoid, unnecessariness. But you can't go through life avoiding this, avoiding that, avoiding this, avoiding that. Something is useful. But if you're going to continue, I'm avoiding this, I'm avoiding that, that's just equivalent to sufferedness, and always talking about your cup half empty and all sorts of stuff like that. But the brain really is equivalent to built-in negative bias we've been talking a bit about, and it'd be nice that we can keep that in mind, all right? Anxiety really is equivalent to a loss of inward attention, and when people don't really feel necessarily really loving in themselves, or they're other than in their eye awareness, they can not necessarily have had their attention more inwardly, just to be empty and flowing, to be an uptime and be in the quick. And then, the poisons always could have been, I want more, I don't have, poor me, and greed and carrot, and hatred and stick and delusion and aversion of stick, and then people generalize their experience, because they have weak ego defenses. They can delete information that's useful. They can be distorting information that really shouldn't be distorted, and that sort of all brain processes which could have been going on. And let's see. So we've been talking in our show how the brain really is only 3 pounds, but 20% of the calories really can be taken up. There's over 100 billion sort of neurons, and how you're using that can have more unnecessary lights turned off versus unnecessary lights sort of being turned on. and the cost of all of this, is enormous because wherever there's been, other than an awareness that words can cause your electrics to be strengthened, or words can be being used in your syntax and stuff just to make people weak, really weak. People could be walking around with their their tail between their legs and all sorts of activeness like that, and they cause other people to really be weak around them too, which, dogs don't even allow that really, because you need to really be in there yourself. That's important. But all sorts of negativity and just running syntax of limited mind function because of aversion and running away and escape and not dealing with things really because you're not being functional necessarily, I mean, why shouldn't you be empty to be in uptime with people where you are versus just being occupied non-stop inside? But your strong emotional processing improves, and encoding process, and all sorts of weak processing like just feebleness just sort of causes atrophy. And people who are moral, they're occupying more regions of their brain which people who are not so moral don't. And then the more rigid people are in their beingness, the more sort of they could have become more very, very morally occupied and very religiously rigid, and even have had rage and challenge with social cues, comprehension difficulty. You say something and they've got to go over and over and over again. Memory challenge, not finding the right words necessarily, and they not easily able to read other people's emotions much, and their presuppositions are perpetually exposing what their deep structure is, and they're unaware of that. It's sort of like a bit of a dullness. But $100 billion is spent annually just on Alzheimer's alone, which could be prevented by being more eye-aware, having a straight spine, and doing live food. But we've been talking a bit about learned helplessness. These anxiogenic benzodiazepine receptor ligands do receive molecules when people could have had learned helplessness as a bit of a pattern, in the way they responded. Because people can have gone into a bit of a trance to respond, and that sort of thing. And, that's what sort of thing happens. But the degree to which beings can really be in control of events that they're exposed to environmentally can have caused people to have either a very strong impact on behaviour and psychological functioning. That's what we've really been talking about. But mainly keep it in mind, humans, 33% of our brain is this prefrontal cortex area, which you're only getting into through interest and pleasure. And the chimp 11, dog 7, cat 3.5, and Stockholm syndrome and the travesty of the stock or Tavistock and information that's negative mostly is just done to maybe unawarely just shut off the brain and through aversive process. And you have a decision, though, but how often do you have to be seen that you're just sighing, always talking about what's negative, and then you're just doing that to everybody around you, But learned helplessness is these anxiogenic benzodiazepine receptors being filled up with chemicals being produced because of learned helplessness sort of having been coded. And what we're talking about is you having the ability to be able to de-hypnotize yourself and be a bit more de-hypnotized and help others become a bit more de-hypnotized. Yeah, that's all. But the degree to which beings can control events you're exposed to, that's what we're talking about, all right? That's what eye awareness really is more about, so that, all of that stuff doesn't have to have had the impact necessarily on you. You only get into your frontal cortex, which is your executive guidance and your ability to plan and sequence things your ability to be able to have a faculty to inspire creative influence of the future is through interest and pleasure, and remaining in interest and pleasure. And words you use, all the words you use and your behavior and everything all have a physiology, all right? We can learn how to behave otherwise helplessly, and we can have failed to respond properly even when having had an opportunity to help by avoiding unpleasantry and circumstance, to have gained even activity to gain some positive reward. Those anxiogenic benzodiazepine molecules, natural molecules that are released in the body, can have been overdone. And that's what post-traumatic stress syndrome and all that sort of stuff is about. Why don't you take charge, get back in there and start driving the bus a little bit more? You know what I mean? Yeah, you can't rely on others, and then I'm asking you to remember that to take responsibility for what you can do yourself, where you are. That's all. That's all. And if you can achieve this, great, and if you can't, great. You know what? The means of an end isn't. It's just simply your achievement and your willingness to achieve something that counts. So those anxiogenic benzodiazepines, otherwise, when you don't, won't, can't, should, must, try, but, only, and just, and you're using words that's excluding, that's a learned behaviour of helplessness and fail to respond to stuff even when an opportunity exists. People could have avoided all sorts of unpleasant circumstances, rightfully so, but then because of a lack of management, they don't know what to do, and not even knowing how to gain positive reward and things, and that's what happens in learned helplessness. The amygdala and tegmentum, rather than being neurologically inhibited because your frontal cortex is active because you have interest and pleasure, and you have whole brain patterning, or the syntax is involved, words you've been using and your own syntax, rolling your eyes like you're overwhelmed, sighing all the time, having your head way out in front of your body, having negative words continuously, all of that internal dialogue stuff is learned helplessness, sighing and everything, It's just a missed opportunity to learn to respond, because it could be better to take a deep breath through your inspiration in through your nose. But it's better to have a increased serotonin activity more naturally occurring, rather than have, hyperactive or hypoactive activity in the dorsal raphe nucleus, which plays a critical role in learned helplessness. But that increased activity of the dorsal raphe, which does involve more serotonin and things, continues to play sort of like a critical role in learned helplessness. But it's possible sort of to break that cycle. Yeah. You've got key brain regions like the basolateral amygdala and the central nucleus of the amygdala, and the bed nucleus and the striatum terminus that's involved in the expression. So you've got areas of the brain that's involved in the expression of learned helplessness behaviour, and that, for the most part, all of it sort of logically inhibits the prefrontal cortex. Yeah. So the dorsal hippocampus and the hypothalamus are all involved in observed states of helplessness, and you really could just simply say that where events can have been uncontrolled, a person can have just got into learned helplessness to be able to survive, basically, turn things off, just to be able to survive. And then where people can have been seen of uncontrollable events around them, I'm sharing with you, get back in there. There's a lot of stuff that you can control within your own self, and that's what this is really about. Stop running around like a rabbit, take charge yourself, and be more balanced in your being, both with your man and your woman sort of thing in yourself. Be a balanced person. But otherwise, I'm just looking around and just being hysterical is to see uncontrollable events, and that's equivalent to just this disruption to the energy and motion we regularly feel. And then people can have been more aggressed and challenged to solve tasks and things, and then there can have ever been more poor health, neglect of self, there can have been false belief in lack of power, less hope in making any changes in life, and persons could have, rather than be optimistic, have been pessimistic in their explanatory style, and then that shows a sufferedness of depressedness and low immunity and increased vulnerability to minor and major illnesses. Yeah. But anyway, with all of that, people should know that as a neurobehavior physiologist, there could have been a really poor recovery prognosis, and abuse created and not fixed up can have ever created more cause learned helplessness and inescapable prejudice, you see. But that matches helplessness, bootstrapped into itself, connected back fully, helpless, born in the face of inescapable, continuous electrical patterning and shocking of yourself, sort of triggering all of that. And people can have ended up with not really being motivated, because you need dopamine, and that all would have been run strap, wouldn't it, from flat strap thinking non-stop. And then procrastination, things can have not necessarily really been getting done like they could. But where children of their needs are not put first, which they should be, loneliness really is what occurs. Then shyness is a behavioural trait. People are passive, active, patterns in their being, and they have anxiety naturally. They can suffer from nyctophobia, and they can suffer from a fear of the dark and fear of unknownness, and they can have a loss of long-term potentiation of the brain and its growth pattern of large pyramidal cells growing from the base of the brain stem through to the neocortex. So that sort of stuff can have not occurred, which is called potentiation of the brain, where exercise stimulates neurogenesis. People that are being treated like Bradley Manning and even Dakota, their movement isn't assisted, and neurogenesis becomes more blocked. But over-breathing and all of that sort of thing causes more seizures and stuff like that, and hypocapnia, which is the loss of proper levels of carbon dioxide. Yeah, and over-breathing, which can have occurred because of anxiety. But hypocapnia, Lukey, is equivalent to lower threshold seizure threshold, and numerous other diseases also can have occurred from over-breathing, and then there's a decrease to the glucose to the brain, and a reduction of oxygenation and rapid breath and acidity more of the brain, more alkalinity of the blood, cells elevated, full more of lactic acid production, and lower seizure threshold ever more, and then child neglect and things, and that can be equivalent to a personality of a learnedness of behaviour problem, and not something easy to be overcome, which a lot of this could be and can be. But the tip of the frontal lobes, of course, perception of our capability, and only as you're having interest and pleasure are you in these areas of the brain. Is this making sense, Lukey?
Yes, Dr. Jubb. I'm looking at a picture of the brain over here and imagining all these things going on, and it's pretty powerful stuff. Definitely going to take another few listens to get it all down.
Yeah. Well,
enjoy it.
I'm a neurobehavior physiologist, and I'm just sharing with you that when you injure unnecessarily, you've actually violated the person's body, and you had no right to do that. For instance, Bradley Manning was stripped naked. Dakota was all his clothes are taken. These kids often their clothes are taken. Nothing's given to them. They're stripped naked of their clothing, and other clothing is given to them, foreign, and even food and everything too. Bradley was stripped to be naked and to stand in front of his cell, and I guess that's equivalent to exposing the helicopter gunship aggression and the killing of the innocent people, where there was an error being made, and that's not right. But who's to know that I don't know what is going on, because he hasn't really spoken. But after several hours of just sort of being there naked to break the spirit, and then having slept without any clothing and all of that sort of thing, a treatment like that is sort of causing people to have a view, that something really is not right, and where really is the enemy actually, and then are you aiding the enemy that you're allowing a person to be treated like that? With Price's son and parole, but detained, in maximum custody for prevention of injury watch, longer than what should be, and held in a cell for 23 hours a day, asked every 5 minutes, as we've been talking about, if he was okay, and he has to respond and things, and that meant he couldn't really sleep either, and no exercise was actually allowed. He has to stop if he's doing anything, apparently. And then he's only allowed a very little, not regular sort of stuff that others even would be allowed to have, reading books much, but perhaps a book, but taken at the end of the day. One magazine, 1 hour outside the cell daily, just to walk, can't run, and stripped down to sleep. And face and hands have to be seen at all times, and more rigorous circumstance that is required, is certainly a contravention to any mandate of how to care for people humanly. But if there's an what reason could exist to be inappropriately treated? But could there be any reason? I don't know. Certainly an inappropriate reason is just an absolute abuse of discretion, period. But that if somebody doesn't receive sheets and pillow and that sort of thing, and they're not allowed to exercise in their cell and things, that's the sort of thing that really can change a person's brain forever. Stress causes metabolic dementia. And metabolic dementia can have been created here in this situation, you see, by reduced neurotransmitter, and then Bradley and other people like that and even Dominic Johansson, the young boy in Sweden that was taken off the plane and taken away from his parents, Dakota, and then everybody who's suffered as they are at the moment. We have to do everything we can to take personal responsibility as we can, and it's not you who've done this. It's just people, they don't know what they're doing, you see. But that sort of stress of that treatment can, of course, metabolic dementia by reduced neurotransmitter. When they took Dakota and then everybody participated in it gleefully, how wrong was that? But he ended up, during that period of time, very low thyroid and in a critical state, high cortisol, low hormone levels, low, of course, estrogen and testosterone, very high homocysteine from foodstuffs consumed that's dead, and stress, and excessive parathyroid calcium sort of stress, and adrenal stress, low B vitamins, hypoxia, meaning low oxygen, and then low seizure threshold, kidney and liver diabetes, and challenges and things, and lack of life sort of interest and pleasure. You've got a lot of normal sort of social disinhibition even under that. People could be bashed to scream and not care in the moment how embarrassing that could be even. They're not even aware of that. Or even that they could be doing the wrong thing. There's aphasias where people can often forget what they're doing, or praxias, forget how to do something, loss of spontaneity, and then stereotypical sort of behaviour includes sort of senseless, sort of repetitive things all the time, perpetually doing something over and over and over again repetitively, or excessively chewing, or doing computerizedness, or clearing, throat clearing, or picking things up, fiddling and fidgeting. But behaviour enacted out of the cortex really involves more executive guidance, Lukey, and this is really your moral adaptness versus not showing your moral ineptitude, which people are really showing their moral ineptitude by not pointing out immediately how people are like Julian and Brad. You've got David Hicks, you've got Dominic Johansson, you've got Dakota Chubb. They're all victims of a victimless crime themselves, which you've got a lot of victimless crime where choices are being taken where there really is no constitutional money, so it's equivalent to no real legal remedy necessarily, except something gone forward more in the private, otherwise you're suffered. You've got a common law in Uniform Commercial Code. You have to learn how to apply it. But investigation really is for a medical battery otherwise, really, because you've been acted upon and there was no really informed consent at all. You didn't give consent and you were just acted on. The body and the psyche of the living spirit can have been a victim, but you're not a victim. You can't be, because what the personal responsibility can you have, or can I have, to take charge where we are? That's all that exists. Otherwise, a person is just with loss, and that's just the victim. But the victim is a living spirit whose freedom has and is being ongoingly being removed for some sort of social engineeredness and political merit present, and a parent, police, and a politician remove the living spirit's choice that is not sort of hindered of any other, of any injury, but is really a very deep injury, them taking choice away from you and I, that our child doesn't have his father. But people could be just Duke boyed and Texas overstepped, which we'll talk a bit about in our program as we have time. We're going to be talking a bit about Duke boyd and exampleness of this and Texas overstepping. But most people's brains have been woofed, white upper-class female. Everybody can have not been necessarily doing the right thing, and each person could be sort of a president in some sort of clique, but that doesn't mean that that's you at all. A victim of child abuse laws exists right now, and victims of all these child abuse laws, or really any law, because you've got no constitutional money, and when people are charged with things, it can be completely fallacious, but it makes money, and that's all. But people are trading places and derivatives. It just makes money, So anything woofed where it's not an even deck, where his laundry is aired and hers not, or he pays the bill and she doesn't, or he's the beast and she's not, or he's doesn't end up with his children and she does. This is called woofed, because their social mores have been organised for him not to be looked after, though he's being retaliated against. Quite a bit in this judicial system. But if you have no constitutional money and you have no constitutional remedy, what you have is retaliation. And if you don't have a system to deal with retaliation, you've just got people becoming victimless, being victims of victimless crime, where choice is being taken from the person and radically altering the person's central nervous system of what they put upon the person to stress and affect a neural immune metabolic stasis and have physiological effects, likely of stress on a living spirit. And then that can have shrunk dendrites. That's one thing. That could have caused a loss of connectivity and anxiety. You can have Bambi not forgetting where the tiger is. So that sort of can be an injury. You've got a picture internally acted as an accessing cue, which could have been triggering things other than consciously and not within your control, perhaps. But eye awareness can give you more control. That can trigger adrenaline, norepinephrine, and cortisol, and could have always been shutting the brain down rather than opening it up, and or considered unnecessary. You see, memory, learning centers. But the amygdala open is Bambi not forgetting where the tiger is. And then you've got celiac condition, and you've got headache along often with this, and cardiovascular can challenge an infection, susceptibility to disease and skin, pain, flow not occurring properly, myalgia, repetitive strain and inquiry, and migraine. We talked about diabetes, infertility, a shorter life, and all leading really causes of death and susceptibleness to this, Lucy, yeah. But where people can have issues, and that kind of had to be resolved in the court and things, and then these are turn-on-yous and the turn-on-these, they can have had to represent you, and you're being just put upon as a fiction, and they're representing you is fictional too, and no investigating of the spirit being joined, and nor any crime necessary. But you would have treated as a rat, kind of treated yourself, but conditioned visceral learning, people really kind of learned helplessness by, the way that society is, yeah. How much more time do we have, mate?
Let's see. I'm going to say we got, it's probably cutting pretty close there, Dr. Jubb. You just pack in the info. It's amazing.
Well, studies on the living spirit really show that qualitative works best rather than quantitative. And you've got people like writing books like Trudeau and other people, and their best effort really is soft waffle in nutrition. And they could be challenging the movement a little bit, but not much, because they can have no real reference material, but except just somebody dead like Pavo Erola, like juice fasting. Wow. But that's where things are. You've got someone in the modern day, and they're not even aware of what's going on in the modern day much, but they bring up Pavo Erola, who was a writer in the movement. Yeah. But you've got studies on the living spirit involving qualitative, not quantitative attention, and not a science. So, quantitative sort of science it's not science. It's more, the merchant, and more about outrage and the merchant, and more about outrage and the merchant, and more about outrage and the merchant.